may give us clarity of thought and mind, that we may comprehend this wonderful truth at the end of the world. We thank you for your loving kindness and your goodness to see it fit to unseal this truth unto us, that we may comprehend them, that they may work upon our lives as living, to change us and fit us up to form part of the citizen of heaven. Lead us through this study, for we have prayed in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, happy Sabbath. We'll continue with our study. But when I was leaving this place, the people sitting on this side told me that they didn't see anything because I was obstructing them when I was teaching. So I repeat some of the things, and we see how far we go today as we continue tomorrow through grace. So we have shown that William Miller understood the year 1843 as going from where? From spring to spring. Not spring to autumn, spring to spring, okay? But this is based on the Jewish what? Calendar. So we have said that this is based on the Jewish calendar. But we know we are operating on what? A Gregorian calendar that runs from what to what? It runs from winter to winter. So this is also the 1840 what? 1843. So we said if you drop this down, you will see that this portion here of the Jewish year 1843 is in what year of our calendar? 1844. Do we see that? Do we see that by the time we come here, the year 1843 on the Gregorian calendar is done what? Is ended. So that this remaining portion of the Jewish year will occur in what year of the Gregorian calendar? It will occur in the year 1844, the Gregorian what? Calendar. So when we looked in the morning and we read Great Controversy, page 391, paragraph 1, this is what Ellen G. White will call what? The spring of 1840 what? So the spring of 1844 was the end of the Jewish year 1840 what? 1843. So when William Miller came up with this understanding, questions began to arise as to why he's shifting from a Gregorian calendar to a Jewish what? Calendar. Because William Miller's initial understanding is that the Jewish year 1843, he understood here why it will end. He understood this will be the what? The spring. The spring what? Equinox. Okay? So he understood this will be the what? Or what we call what? Another name for spring equinox is? So he understood these will be the vernal or spring what? Equinox. He understood these to be around the date March 21st. And that this Jewish year 1843 began when? It had begun what? On the vernal equinox on March what? 21st. So he understood these will mark the end of the Jewish year 1843, and it will usher in the second coming of who? Christ. Jesus Christ. But questions began to arise. Why shifting from a Gregorian calendar to what? A Jewish calendar. So as the Millerites were attempting to give answers to their opponents, his associates began to engage in a deep study of the Jewish calendar, okay? Now when they engaged in a deep study of the Jewish calendar, they came to realize that William Miller had made what? A mistake in choosing the vernal equinox as the ending of the Jewish year 1843, and they made a shift. They made a shift from the vernal equinox, which occurs around the month of March 21st. So this is 1840, March 21st or 1844. They want to make a shift to where? To April 18th of 1844 as the true ending of the Jewish 1840 what? 1843. Do we see that? So as they begin to answer these questions, while they are shifting from a Gregorian calendar to a Jewish calendar, they come to realize that William Miller was wrong in saying that the year 1843 will end in the vernal equinox, which occurs around the March 21st of what? 1844. Therefore, they made a shift from March to what? To April 18th, and this will mark here the last day of the last month of the Jewish 1840 what? 1843. Do we understand? So this will mark the last day of the last month of the Jewish 1840 what? 1843. So this is something that we have already done what? Discussed and understood. Now we came to a quotation from Ellen White. So I'm repeating this from Amulinet, but I don't see her here. Oh, you were here. Now I've been trying to look for you. So when you come to that quotation of Ellen White, which we read from the book Testimonies, volume 1, page 52, beginning from paragraph 2 to what? To 3, which says, from the date of the decree of the king of Persia, found in Ezra 7, which was given before Christ, the 300 years of Daniel 8:14 must terminate with 1840 what? 43. Accordingly, we look to the end of this year, the end of the year 1840 what? 43, for the coming of what? Christ. For the coming of the Lord, sorry. We were sadly disappointed when the year entirely did what? Passed away, and the Savior had not done what? So at first, William Miller was saying, this will mark the end of the Jewish 1840 what? 43. But before they come to this actual date, somewhere here in the month of February and January, as they engage in a deep study of the Jewish calendar, they shift from March 21st to what? To April 18th of 1840 what? 1844. And this is what, now at this date here, April 18th of 1844, the Jewish 1843 entirely did what? Entirely passed away. Do you see that? So this will mark the end of the Jewish 1840 what? 43. And who were they waiting to come at the end of the Jewish 1843? Our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. Did he come? So as a result of the failure of Christ to come, what happened to them? The following day, which will be what? April 19th of 1844, they experienced what? A disappointment. So this will mark the first day of the first month of the Jewish 1840 what? 1844. Are we seeing that? So they were waiting for Christ until this date. He failed to come. The following day, which will be on the 19th of April, they experienced a disappointment as a result of Christ failing to do what? To come. Now, then she continues to say, it was not first perceived that if the decree did not go forth at the beginning of the year 450 what? 7. Let me try and explain this point once again. So she's saying the decree, it was not first perceived by the Millerites that the third decree given by King Artaxerxes never went into effect at the beginning of the year 457 what? BC. Are we understanding that? Because we know that when 300 days begin in what year? In the year 457 and end when? No, let's now say 1840 what? 1843, and this will mark the beginning to the end of the 2300 what? Years. So she's saying, so when we're writing 1843 here, what we are writing is this date. Are we seeing that? So this will correspond with the what? The April 18th of 1840 what? 1844. This is what we mean by the year 1840 what? According to this quotation here. Are we understanding? So she's saying that this kind of understanding was based upon a misconception on the part of the Millerites of not understanding that the decree of Artaxerxes did not go into effect at the beginning of the year 450 what? 457. Okay? So if we were to have the year 457, so let's have, this is the year 450 what? 57, and we go, this will be the year what? 1843. So this will be the first day of the first month of the year what? 457, and this will be the last day of the last month of the year 450 what? 7, and this will be the what? The first day of the first month of the year 1843, and this will be the last day of the last month of the year what? 1843, which will be what? April 18th of 1844. Do we understand? So she was trying to explain that the Millerites never understood that this decree never went into effect at the big years. We therefore inquire at what point in the year 457 are we to commence to reckon from the fact that the first 490 years are allotted to the building of the street and the what? Now before I explain what that point means, is that when you read this quotation from Uriah Smith, and we read the quotation from the Spirit of Prophecy, so because this was Smith from 233 paragraph 1 in his book Land Revelation, and we read the quotation from Ellen G. White in Testimonies volume 1, not volume 5. Volume 1, page 52, paragraph 2 to 3, they were both addressing what? The third decree of Artaxerxes, which was given in what year? In the year 457. Where do we find that decree in the book of Ezra? Huh? We find that book in what? Ezra chapter 7 and verse what? Verse 9. Now at this point, I want to show you how Ezra 7:9 contributed greatly to the Millerites shifting from the spring to what? To the autumn, okay? Are we seeing that? So we want to understand how did this contribute as an evidence to the Millerites in allowing them to shift from spring to what? To autumn, before we explain that point of Smith. Now, so we know that in the year 457, according to Ezra 7:9, we have what? The first day of the first month, and here we have the what? The first day of the fifth month. Now when you read from the book of Daniel 9, what was the purpose of the third decree? Or its job function? To restore and rebuild what? But when we read the book of Ezra 7:9, on the first day of the first month, what do we realize that Ezra is doing? He's leaving. So he's in Jerusalem to begin the work of rebuilding. So that decree will not go into effect on the first day of the first month, because the decree, it was concerning a work of rebuilding and restoring what city? But here, in what city are they? In Babylon. They're beginning a journey out of what? Now, therefore, the work of restoring and rebuilding Jerusalem cannot be given. Okay? Now, when we come to the first day of the fifth month, what happens to Ezra? He arrives where? In Jerusalem. Okay? Now, we expect, therefore, the earliest date he may begin the work of rebuilding will be what? The first day of the fifth. But we understood that there was a component of the third decree that Ezra was required to fulfill before they begin the actual work of doing what? Rebuilding. What component was that? To restore the government, to reinstitute the government, okay? And we know that obviously takes him some time, and therefore we said, when does the actual work of building begin? 10th day of the 7th. So we showed that it's going to begin on 10th day of the 7th what? Month. So this therefore will mark the beginning of what? 2300 what? Days. So we know that, we know that all these is in what year? 457. So this will begin then bring us to what year? The 1840? The 1844, but it will bring us to what? To the autumn of that year, what we call what? The 10th day of the 7th month, which was what? October 22nd of 1840 what? So this was the 10th day of the 7th what? The 7th month in the 1840 what? 44, but we know that in this year, therefore, we have to have what? A first day of the 5th month, and what? A first day of the first month. But you know that initially, the Millerites were waiting for Christ to come when? Here, in the spring. This was their point of first waiting, okay? Now they are going to, when this time passes by and they experience a disappointment, they are going to shift from this spring to the autumn, okay? This is the what? The autumn, which fell in the 22nd of October of 1844, which is the 10th day of the 7th month. Now, if they are shifting from here to here, they have to have biblical evidence why they are doing that, okay? And what is the biblical evidence? Is the book of Ezra 7 what? 9. It gives us an outline to know where to begin the third decree from, other than 200 years. The third decree went into effect when? On the 10th day of the 7th month of the year 457. Therefore, employing this rule of full years, it could not end until the 10th day of the 7th month in the autumn of the year 1844, which occurred in October 22nd, 1844. Do you understand? Have you understood how Ezra contributed to explaining that? Isaac, have you understood? So Ezra, that's how Ezra is going to do what? To contribute to help them shift from the spring, and we are calling this first day of the first month the what? The spring to what? To the autumn, which is the 10th day of the 7th what? 7th month. Mamulines, are you saying something now? Okay. So, I want us to continue then to read Smith's what? Smith's quotation. Smith says this: we therefore inquire, that's on page 83, we therefore inquire at what point in the year 457 are we to commence to reckon, from the fact that the 49 years were allotted to the building of the streets and the walls. What are the 49 years that Smith is speaking about? Huh? What are the 49 years that Smith is speaking about? So do we know the 70 weeks of Daniel 9? The 70 weeks are done what? They are cut off from where? Determined means to be cut off from. So if you had the complete 2300 days, we know that it's going to be divided into how many portions? 1810 years and what? 490 years, which are the 7 weeks of years, okay? Which has been cut off from this 2300 what? So that if you take the whole sum, gives you how many years? 2300 what? Years. Now we know that these 490 years, or the 69 weeks, are subdivided, okay? How are the 7 weeks, not 69, sorry. How are the 7 weeks subdivided? We know that 7 weeks are divided into what? 7 weeks. Okay? Then you have what? 62 weeks. Then you have what? 1 week. Are we understanding? So that the whole of these gives you how many weeks? 70 weeks. So when Smith is speaking of 49 years, what is he speaking about? He's speaking about this first 7 weeks. Okay? Are we saying that? Because a week, so 1 week has how many days? 7 days. But how many weeks do we have? Therefore we'll have what? 7 times 7, you get what? Which will be equal to 49 days. But we understand that 1 day equal to what? 1 year. Are we saying that? So Smith, when he's speaking of 49 years, that will guide us to determine in what portion of the year 457 BC to begin the 2300 days, he's speaking about these 7 weeks. And what was the purpose of the 7 weeks? They were dedicated for the building of the streets and the walls. And we are saying that work of building could not begin as early as the spring. Will not begin. So the first 7 will not begin in the spring of 457. Neither will it begin in the summer of 457. But when did it begin? In the autumn of 457 BC, which is the what? The 10th day of the 7th. So Smith is going to give this argument that is going to allow them to mark that this here is going to mark the portion in the year 457 where to mark the beginning point of the 200 days from. Are we following? Are we following? So, then he continues to say, we learn that the period is to be dated not from the starting of Ezra from Babylon. When did Ezra start from Babylon? The first day of the first month. So he's saying it can only be dated from him beginning from Babylon, but from the actual commencement of the work at Jerusalem. When was the actual commencement of the work in Jerusalem? On the 10th day of the 7th what? 7th month. Then, which is not probable, could not be earlier than the what? The 7th month in bracket what? Autumn. Are you seeing what he's saying? And we are saying it's here, which is the 10th day of the 7th what? And we have reasons for that. And he did not, as he did not arrive at Jerusalem until the 5th month of that year, Ezra 7:9. The whole period will therefore extend to the 7th month, autumn, Jewish time of 1840 what? 1844. So I'm saying, if you read this quotation and you combine with Smith's quotation, you will see that both Ellen White and Smith are giving Ezra 7:9 as the piece of information that allowed the Millerites to shift from what? The spring of 44 to what? To the autumn of 40 what? 44. So do we see how Ezra 7:9 contributed? Yeah. So we are coming to we'll come and understand that from Ezra 7:9 the Millerites were required to understand the first day of the what? The first day of the first month, and this will point them to what? To the 10th day of the what? The 7th month. Without a correct understanding of the first day of the first month, the 10th day of the 7th month becomes shaky. Are we understanding that? So that's why we are making a claim that Ezra 7:9 became present truth in the 19th century in the history of our spiritual forefathers, the Millerites.
So just concerning the first day, would it mean the Israelites when was starting from Egypt? I think God gave them command that the first month will be the beginning of the year. So does it apply to the 9th?
Okay, we'll show that tomorrow, hopefully. Then we are saying now, the Millerites really made a great deal on the first day of the first month, which allowed them to understand what? The 10th day of the 7th month, which we are calling the autumn of 44. But we are saying that the same Ezra 7:9 becomes present truth in the 21st century when God is developing and raising up the what? The 144 what? 1,000. And this will be instrumental for us in understanding what? The 5th day of the 4th month and what? The first day of the what? The 5th month. So this here becomes present truth at the end of the what? The end of the world. That's why we are saying the issue of calendation is important to do what? To understand. But we want to give that Samuel Snow, in giving his argument, he didn't only use Ezra 7:9 to show how we shift from the spring to what? To the autumn. I want us to show further arguments that he gives. Let's turn to page 87. Page 87. The last quotation down there from Leroy Edwin Fromm. Do we see that? Are we seeing that quotation?
Yes.
Page 87, the last quotation. Huh? Are we seeing the quotation from Leroy Edwin Fromm? Huh? Under the title Midnight Cry. It says Snow brought forth 4 points. Do we see that? It's saying Snow brought out 4 points. 1. The correction of previously recognized error in calculation had brought about the shift from what? 1843 to what? That's what we have explained on the board. Are we seeing that? And this explanation is based on the book of Ezra chapter 7 verses 9. So let's get to the second argument that Snow gives. The 7 weeks of years both began and ended in what? In autumn. So let's try and explain that. The 7th week. Where do we find the 7th weeks? Huh? So Daniel 9:24. So we want to give the 7th weeks as a second argument that allowed the Millerites to shift from the spring to what? From spring to autumn. From the spring to what? To the autumn in October 22nd. So we know that the 7th weeks, which is 490 years, begin when? Years. And here you have 3.5 what? Years. Okay? Now, so it's saying that the 7th weeks both begin and end in autumn, therefore proving that the 2300 days will do what? Will end in the what? In the autumn. Okay? So let's see how the 7th weeks begin in autumn and end in what? In autumn. Now, we know that when Christ was crucified on the cross, he was what? The Passover lamb. When was Passover celebrated? On the 14th day of the what? Is this spring, summer, winter, or autumn? Spring. So Christ is going to hang on the cross on what season? In the spring, here. But how many years does it take from the crucifixion of Christ to the stoning of Stephen? 3.5 years, okay? So let's do something here. So if this is the spring of 31, okay? Then we have what? 32, 33, and that what? 34. So if we go from spring to spring, that will be what? 1 year. Are we seeing that? Then we go from this spring to that spring, that will be what? Another year. When we go from that spring to that spring, that will be what? Another year. How many years are there? But how many years did we have? So we go half a year from the spring. Where do we come to? If you go 6 months from spring, where does it bring you to? To autumn. But this is still within the year what? 34. So when was Stephen stoned? When was Stephen stoned, therefore? Because when Stephen was stoned, it didn't mark the end of the 7th weeks. So was Stephen stoned here or here? Are you confused? Are we confused? How many years are there from the crucifixion of Christ to the stoning of Stephen? So this is 1 year, another year, this will be the 3rd year. Have we covered this half? So we have to shift this half to come to where Stephen is stoned. When we shift that half, where do we come to? The autumn of what year? 34 AD. Are we seeing that? So the 7th weeks end when? In 34 AD, but what season? In autumn. If they end in autumn, therefore it means the 490 years began when? In autumn. Are we seeing that? So it began in what? In autumn. Are we okay? But we know if we take away this 1 week, how many years do we remain with here? 69 weeks, which are how many years? 43 years, okay? So let's take the year 457 BC, and we take 483 years. Where does it bring us to? 27. But we don't know what portion in the year 27 AD. Okay? Now in the year AD 27, what happened significant? The baptism of? So this is the baptism. But before Christ is baptized, who begins to preach? Now, wait first. When Christ is baptized, how old is he? He's 30 years. Who baptizes him? John the Baptist. But how old was John the Baptist to Jesus? So we know 6 months later, 6 months earlier, in the year 27 in the spring, who begins to preach? Because John the Baptist begins to preach here because he's how many years here? John the Baptist is 30 years. It takes how many years for Christ to become 30? 6. So if you take 6 from spring of 27, when was Christ therefore baptized? Are you saying that it's in the autumn? Huh? So this is the autumn, okay? So the 43 years end when? 43 years end when? Therefore, when did they begin? In the autumn of 457. Are we saying that? So that's what Fromm means by saying that the 490 years both begin in autumn and end when? But when 300 days was divided into how many portions? 490 and 18 what? So if we take 1810 from the autumn of 34, where do we go to? So you come to 1844, the autumn. Do we see how the Miller has explained it? Huh? Those are the arguments Snow gave. But when you come to the end of the world, we're giving sketch arguments of the 0 year. Okay? So these are the arguments that Snow did what? Gave. So this the second argument of Snow. So he has used Ezra 7:9. He's going to use the 7th week. He's saying the 490 years both begin in autumn and end when? In autumn. No, not 1810. They begin in autumn and end when? In autumn. So that when you add 1810 years brings you to what? To the autumn of 44. Are we understanding? Are we okay? Okay, let's go to the third point of Snow. The third point of Snow says the Mosaic tabernacle types indicate that the second advent will occur in the autumn, not in the what? In the spring, but on the day of atonement, or the day of the 7th what? Month. Now, the theology of the Millerites was based on which verse of the Bible? Their message was based on what verse of the Bible? Daniel 8? Daniel 8:14. And what does Daniel 8:14 speak about? So we go this way. So this is 457, and this will be what? 2300 days, and this will be Daniel 8 what? 14, and this will be Daniel chapter 9. Daniel 8:14 speaks about what? The cleansing of the sanctuary. Now, the way we understand it at a basic level is that this cleansing of the sanctuary is the sanctuary in heaven. Okay? But do we have a pattern of that on earth? Do you have a pattern of that on earth? On what day and on what month was that pattern on earth cleansed? So that's what is called the Mosaic tabernacle system, okay? So in the Mosaic tabernacle system, the cleansing of the sanctuary occurred when? On the 10th day of the 7th month, what we call the day of what? The day of atonement. So he's going to use this argument that since the typical sanctuary, in the typical sanctuary services, the cleansing of the sanctuary occurred on the 10th day of the 7th month, the day of atonement, therefore the antitypical day of atonement will also take place when? On the 10th day of the 7th month. So they give that argument. Therefore he's going to say that this is going to take when? On the 10th day of the 7th month, and we know that the 7th month is in what season? In the autumn, therefore confirming the 300 days began when in 457? They began on autumn. Do we see that? Do you know why I'm saying autumn and autumn? This is the concept of the full years. If we don't do autumn and autumn, we have already disobeyed the principle of the full what? So if it ends in autumn, when must it have begun? Autumn, to maintain the principle of what? The full year concept. Are we okay? So that is point number 3 of Samuel Snow. Point number 4. As the Passover crucifixion, the wave sheaf resurrection, and the Lord's time for Pentecost all came on the exact days prophesied, so Snow continued. He believed that the untypical day of atonement will come on the exact day done what? Now let's deal with some point here a little bit. Now we know that in the Jewish economy we had 7 what? Feasts. What was the first of that feast? Passover. The second, feast of unleavened bread. Number 3, feast of first fruits, or what we call what? The wave sheaf. Then number 4, Pentecost, or what? The feast of weeks. Number 5,
Feast of trumpets.
so the feast of the what? The trumpets. Number 6, Day of Atonement. Then number 7, Feast of Tabernacles, or Feast of Booths. So these are the 7 feasts. Now we know that this feast, and that feast occurred in what season? In the spring. This one occurred in summer. Pentecost.
Pentecost is between summer and
Okay.
and after.
50 days after the feast of first fruits. Where does that take you? It goes May. It goes June. It is summer. This one is in summer, okay? Then we have these occurred when? In the autumn. So these are the spring feasts, but we also include this one which occurred in the summer, okay? So Samuel Snow is going to develop an argument from these feasts. Now we know that this one here occurred on the 14th day of what? The first month. This one began when? On the 15th of the first, and took how many days?
7 days.
It took 7 days. This one here began or occurred on the 16th day of the first month. This one occurred 50 days from the feast of first fruits.
From that, setting the first week, it will take 7 weeks.
50 days from first fruits. Then we come to trumpets. It began on the first day of the 7th month and took how many days? 10 days. When we come to the Day of Atonement, occurred when? 10th day of the 7th, the 15th day of the 7th month, and took how many days? 7 days. Are we okay with that? So, he's going to argue that Christ in his first advent fulfilled these spring feasts, okay? Paul calls him the Passover lamb, okay? Leaven is a symbol of what? Did Christ have sin? That's why he rested on the grave on the tomb on the Sabbath day. Then wave sheaf, Paul also called him what? The first fruits. So he said that he fulfilled these feasts, but he also fulfilled this feast to the literal days of the feast. Are we saying that? Literal days of the feast. So that the death of Christ was on the 14th day of the first what? Month. His resting on the grave was on the 15th day of the first month, and his resurrection was when? On the 16th day of the first what? Month. But also Pentecost occurred exactly 50 days after the feast of first fruits on the little day it occurred in the typical services. Okay? So Samuel Snow is going to argue based upon these 4 witnesses that therefore the cleansing of the sanctuary, the untypical day of atonement, will occur on the exact literal day. Are we seeing that? Therefore he argues that it will occur on the 10th day of the 7th what? Month, which was the literal day of the cleansing of the what? The sanctuary. And we know that argument was what? Was sound. Are we okay on that point? How Samuel Snow uses it. So, that's what he says. Ellen White also comments on this in the book Red Controversy 398, okay? So I'm saying, much of this history we are laying out on Ezra 7:9, on the reform lines. This information is all contained in the conflict of the Ages series, okay? What are the books of the conflict of the Ages series? Number 1, Nyamwe, Ananiambia time. Which is the first book in the conflict of the Ages series? Patriarchs and Prophets. Number 2, Prophets and Kings. The third one, Desire of Ages. Number 4, Acts of the Apostle. And the 5th one is what? Great Controversy. That brings you from the time period where Acts of the Apostle stops all the way to the end of the Great what? Now all this information is contained there, and we are required to read those books and what? And understand, okay? So, we see that the Millerites, in defending October 22nd, 1844, as the 10th day of the 7th month, as the true ending of the 2300 days, they had very strong what? Arguments. But when we come to the end of the world, those strong arguments have been buried by the traditions of what? Men, so that God's people no longer have a view or an understanding of those strong arguments. Okay? But I'm telling you, if we lack those strong arguments, what happens is that there is a point that is coming when our faith is severely to be done what? To be tested, and would be required to stand and defend our faith, and then we begin to crash and crumble under the pressure that is piled upon us. And when we crash and crumble under the pressure, we are going to eternally lose our what? Salvation. Time is short, but short enough for us to go back to the Conflict of the Ages series. Read and gather all this information, because it's as we understand this information that it will work upon us like leaven to do what? To change us and prepare us to be candidates fit for the kingdom of who? Kingdom of God. So tomorrow we'll come and show how the Millerites arrived on the first day of the first month as being what? April 19th of 1840 what? 1844. So that will be done when? Tomorrow. May God bless us.
Amen.
Let me pray. Our dear Father in heaven, we thank you for the privilege of studying your word. For you have not articulated this thought in a clear, concise, and intelligent manner. We pray that your people may go and search and fill in the fragments. May none of us here take this information for granted. May none of us here be lifted up in the heart thinking that we know. May we go back and read the publications of our pioneers, especially in the year 1844, to understand how they had strong arguments to defend October 22nd, 1844, the true ending of the 300 days. As we depart this evening, we mark the conclusion of our service this day. We pray that a special blessing may rest upon all of us as we go back to our secret recesses and contemplate and wrap our minds about these things. Please lead us through this 10-day convocation, that light may be diffused unto your people. I'm praying for my brother Robert, brother Benjamin, and my brother Hezbon, who are traveling tonight from Nairobi, that you may guide them safely to this place, that brother Robert may also come and stand and break to us the bread of life. Have mercy on him. May you touch our lips with the call of the altar, myself, Robert, and Boaz, that we may speak grace unto the hearers. And may the hearers, all of us, ascertain that what we are learning and hearing is truth, by severely testing it and criticizing every point that we have brought before you, so you can be sure that we are holding on to sound doctrine. Lead and guide us, for we pray in Jesus' name.